So I know most of you probably know who Barack Obama is, the first black president of the US. So after he was elected, a lot of people said, oh, the US, we're post-racial. Race doesn't matter anymore. Anyone can be whatever they want to be. We have a black president. But this talk is sort of to explore why that isn't the case, why race is still such an important issue to everyone. So first, I want you to know who I am. So I'm an American, born and raised African-American culture, but my parents are both Tanzanian. So for me, a lot of the examples I'm using, they're what I know. So they involve African-Americans, they involve the US, and it's also because they're also more funny because they're my own examples. But there are also examples I could have drawn from everywhere in the world, so I just want you all to know that. But that's why I chose these ones, because they're my examples. So first, I want to talk about what race is. So in a conference, I was asked this question, and I struggled, like, what is race? I know, like, skin color, but trying to put in words what race is was difficult. So online, they say it's the genetically transmitted physical characteristics that distinguish local, geographic, and global human populations. Sounds like very confusing stuff, but next we did an activity called RACEBOOK. So it's just like Facebook, where instead of writing on your friends' walls, you write on different races, different stereotypes you associate with them. And the thing I love about this activity is for a lot of white people, it's the first time they see stereotypes that are associated with them. And my favorite one, yes, it is the first time. And my favorite one is curious. Now, there's a lot of ways to interpret curious. It could be, oh, they seek knowledge, maybe scientists, researchers. But for me and my friends, it was, they do certain activities you don't need to do, because they're just too curious. And it sort of leads to websites like stuff white people like, or they get activities that are considered white people stuff. And in grade 9, my school went on an outdoor trip where me and my friends were forced to go caving. And halfway through, my friend, who's African-American, fell into muddy, creaky water, had to still trudge halfway through the cave, and all she could say is, this is white people stuff. And it's because we associate certain things with certain races. Now, if race wasn't so important, we wouldn't try so hard to fit into these boxes. Like, if I'm not black enough, I'm an Oreo. If you're not Asian enough, you're a banana. And still, we try to live up to these standards that are set for us through media, through all this stuff. I remember at my old middle school, as an African-American student, I had to learn every dance. Soulja Boy, Cat Daddy, Dougie, I had to go home, research them, practice for hours, look like I was just born knowing these moves. But if you were white or Asian or someone else, it was okay. You could try to pick it up from your friends, but not from me. And so it makes you wonder why we put so much emphasis into trying to fit into our race, something that is just a physical characteristics. So then it goes into what comes into being a race, what goes into being someone in your race. And part of it is communication. If you do code switching, it's when you talk differently to different races. So for me, if I'm in an interview or I'm trying to impress someone, I'll talk white. You use big words, you sound educated. You just don't slouch, you just try to look like a white person on TV would. But if you talk black, and I'll give you an impression in a second, it's more chill, more toned down. I have one friend who's known for doing this. Girl, I'ma need you, and so on. And it provides a unity with you and people in your race, but also a separation in how you have to constantly be switching and how you behave with some people and how you behave with others. So how can we all come together when we all talk differently? So you wonder, when is race no longer important? Of course, there's people who are race neutral. It doesn't matter what they are, you don't think about it. So when I thought of that, I thought of Oprah. Because you don't think of Oprah's race, you think of how much money she has and how much free stuff she gives away. But still, when Oprah went to Europe and tried to buy this bag, the shopkeeper, not realizing it was Oprah, was like, no, sorry, it's too expensive for you. It was only $38,000. That's not too expensive for Oprah. But still, someone you don't really think about her race constantly is still affected by her race in everyday life. And also the knowledge that comes into being a race. Sort of how we have Black Famous. There's certain magazines, certain movies that are advertised just to a minority, and they can net millions of dollars, but still, it's sort of kept within a certain group. There's Black entertainment television, where awards are only won by African Americans, also because they don't tend to win as many awards in the mainstream. Even if you're Indian, you have an Indian famous, maybe more of the Bollywood actors and actresses. I imagine not everyone knows who those people are. So it even separates our races further, as there's only certain knowledge going into certain groups and not as much overlapping, though of course at UWC there is. So if there's so many different ways we talk, different knowledge we have, how can we do simple things like dating between races? Especially in the world of online dating with the increase in technology, how does that work, going to a race that you don't know? And for some people, it discourages them. It leads to dating websites like Black People Meet, where you can meet black singles around you only. And at first, yeah, it sounds a little crazy. But imagine, you want to date someone sometimes with similar experiences with you. They understand where you're coming from. And at first, it's a little crazy because it's just black people in a group. But then there's Christian Mingle, where only Christians can date each other. There's Jewish dating websites, and there's atheist dating websites. Because sometimes you just want to date someone who gets you. Even like popular, Match.com, eHarmony, you can select the certain races you want to date. Because it matters, these experiences we go through. So if we're deciding who to date based on color, based on physical characteristics, how concrete are our races? Are they the same everywhere? And the answer is no. If you look at Rihanna, you might all be like, she's black. But Rihanna was born and raised in Barbados, where she was bullied for being white her whole life, till she moved to the US. So how can we treat people differently when races aren't even the same thing everywhere you go? It just makes it such a crazy idea. So, if race isn't concrete, can it be what you present of yourself, like what you tell people? And I hope it is, but I'm starting to see more and more it's not. Now, universities and other forums are saying multiracial is considered a race. But in our time, it was more like what you look like to other people, that's your race. That's the one you have to fall under. You have to choose one. And it's because it's confusing. Which parts of each race do you fit into? Which goes into making you? Even Obama, who's half black and half white, he doesn't really call himself multiracial. He was raised by his white family. And though he talks about it, he's always heralded as the black president, black president. And you wonder, if he'd said, I'm the first multiracial president, would he have been able to win the presidency, get as many votes from black people? Or would a politician be like, I don't really care if you're multiracial, you're black to us? Even Tiger Woods is very vehement, half black, half Asian, multicultural. But if you ask your everyday American, they'll be like, oh yeah, the black golfer. They're not gonna focus on that other side of his whole identity. So then, can race be what you present of yourself when other people will just choose what it is of you based on your physical characteristics? And it's still important when we have achievements like first black president, first black Broadway Cinderella. It shows us that race is difficult, that if you have a different race, you have different expectations, different things standing in your way. So if there's progress when we have the first this, first that, then it still must be so important if we have to have this benchmark, this hallmark, this milestone come for us. One thing I want to talk about is religion. Just briefly, don't worry, not too uncomfortable. But if you go to different churches, you'll see different depictions of Jesus. And if you look at the Bible, he'd probably be a Middle Eastern guy. But part of it is that when we pray, when we watch TV, we want to see part of ourselves in what we're doing. We want to be represented in what we see. And that's why we have these sort of things. And entertainment, one thing is that there's not enough representation for minorities and other people who lack a voice. Lupita Nyong'o, this is her quote here, is now an award-winning actress. And she said, the voices on television are louder than the voices of our parents. And in her time, when she was younger, she was told because of her dark complexion, she would never find a husband. Now she makes millions of dollars. So I think that's in the back of her mind. But still, just because of what people had seen on TV, lighter African Americans were deemed more worthy of marriage, more lovable than the darker ones. And just because of what we see on TV, that's what we internalize, what we think. I want to talk about blackface. If you're not aware of what that is, it's when you take black paint and try to make yourself look like an African American. There's yellow face and other types. But the example I want to focus on is this new TV show, Gotham. And Jada Pinkett Smith is one of the main actresses in the show. And instead of doing her own action, they hired a stunt woman, of course. But instead of choosing a stunt woman who is African American, they chose a white one. Yes, and they were going to paint her completely black. And only after outcry, they just hired a black stunt woman to fill in her role. Exactly. And it just goes to show that media, just the way that sensitivity is in the world, they don't think about the representation. They don't think about how this could harm other people. And it's just to show that it's such an impact on what you see out there and what you internalize and what you think. Like whitewashing. It's sort of when you read a book, they barely talk about race, or they only highlight it slightly, that you just ignore it. You just assume the character is white. And the biggest example of that was in Hunger Games, where people outcried about Rue and other characters being African American. Though if you look at the book, it explicitly states dark skin and other features that distinguish them from being white. Yet so many people were so surprised at the movie for casting these African American actors. So why is it we get this way of thinking, that we just sort of assume irrationally that everyone's white until they're way proven white, super proven that they're not white? So I want you to think of what these people have in common. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you might recognize the faces. But the thing is, they're all the same character from Harry Potter. So puberty must have been very confusing for this little black girl turning into a white girl. And it's Harry Potter. It's a series so many people all over the world see. So imagine the impact it can have on little kids, seeing a character that they'd sort of related to being changed into a white person, especially when Harry Potter already lacked so much racial diversity. And last thing I want to highlight about this talk is just that race is an important thing everywhere. When people heard I was talking about race, they're like, oh, you're just going to talk about America. You're not going to talk about Asia. You're not going to talk about Singapore. It's not a problem. But on my last IFP trip, which is an inter-school initiative for peace thing to spread peace all over the world, we were leaving the airport, collecting our bags. We did our group huddle. Yeah! We were a group, a unit. And we're leaving the airport all together, pumped up after what we've done, when the security guard stopped me and my African friend. And then on the other side, there's an African girl who they stop. And then there's one guy who looks like a stereotypical terrorist, and they stop him as well. But the rest of the 30 people leave and have to awkwardly wait for us on the other side as we get our bags searched through the scanner. And at first, the guy even says, "Your students here?" with such surprise in his face. And it's just that the certain expectations we all carry are why race is important. Because when you don't see the consequences of someone's race, you're denying their reality. You're denying their reality. So it makes you wonder, how long will race be an important thing to us? I think forever, and there's nothing wrong with that. Race teaches us the lessons we learn. It makes us into the people we become with the memories we make. And without race, you wouldn't be who you are today, because it leads into the knowledge you have, the way you talk, the way you associate with people. So yeah, race is still an important issue. So don't forget that is the main point of this talk. I hope you enjoy your lunch.